We're going to have about an hour. He's going to speak for about 20 minutes and then take questions. So thank you, Governor Gary Johnson.
So I would just like you all to know that first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur. I view what I'm doing right now as entrepreneurial. But I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974, and in 1994 I actually had 1,000 employees, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. American dream come true based on the simplest of concepts. I always showed up on time, always did what I said I would do, did a little bit more than what I said I would do for people. And of course that was what we did as a company, and that's why the company grew and prospered. Anyway, I sold that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job and business is doing better than ever. I view my venture into politics as entrepreneurial. I'd never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party a couple of weeks before I announced, and what they said was, "We like you, we like what you've got to say, but you just need to know that you'll never get elected, that it's not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor in a state that is 2-to-1 Democrat." Well, I got elected. How did that happen? I'd like to think it was based on what I had to say, which was I was going to run state government like a business. I was going to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price, issues first, politics last. There weren't going to be any sacred cows at all because, you know what, there was no politics involved with this. It was really about issues, period. It was about trying to do the best that we should do as government. So I got elected, and the first thing I find myself doing is saying no to a whole lot of legislation. I ended up vetoing 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I ended up having thousands of line item vetoes, which, putting that into perspective, was more than the other vetoes of the other 49 governors combined. But it really made a difference. It made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. And no doesn't fly. Just saying no doesn't fly. Because all these vetoes got played out on the front page of the newspaper and on television as to why I should be vetoing this kind of legislation. Because, you know what, I vetoed motherhood. I think motherhood's important, but do we need to allocate $500,000 to memorialize motherhood in New Mexico? No, I don't think we need to do that. I was willing to discuss and debate all of the reasons why I didn't think government was the answer to all of our ills. And I always viewed legislation from my standpoint also. 45-mile-an-hour speed limit in a construction zone, quadruple fines. I get that legislation on my desk. Well, you know what? 45 miles an hour in a construction zone when there's construction going on oftentimes is reckless driving. But late at night when you're driving through that same stretch and the signs are up and you can drive 75, which I do, I didn't want to get hit with a quadruple fine for doing that. So I vetoed that legislation. There was all sorts of that kind of stuff. You know, a young man hurts his head in northern New Mexico pole vaulting. Well, the next thing you know, I have a piece of legislation on my desk making helmets for pole vaulters mandatory. I vetoed that bill. I was a pole vaulter in high school. I just thought that should be a choice, and I wouldn't have wanted to wear a helmet, pole vaulting. My favorite piece of legislation that I vetoed was a Republican bill, and I will tell you that only two of my vetoes were overridden. So it really made a huge difference when it came to money spent. And the legislature was a third Republican. A third of my vetoes were of Republican bills. Because Republicans grow government kind of like the Democrats, only Republicans do it in a way that it's a good way. They grow government because ultimately it'll lead to smaller government. I never got that equation. I just vetoed those kinds of bills. My favorite bill that I vetoed was a Republican bill, but for my signature would have become law. It was a dog and cat exercise bill that was going to require pet stores to exercise their dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. Now, gotta tell you, I think that's a great idea. It's where I would like to buy my dogs and cats, is in a pet store that advertises we exercise our dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. But if I had signed that legislation, then I would have had to have funded the dog and cat exercise police to go along with that. So again, I think that this really made a difference. It's something that I got known for. I want to make the outrageous claim that I was the fiscally most conservative governor in all 50 states, and I'll just base that simply on all the spending that I stopped from happening, all the growth of government that I stopped from happening, that wasn't going to make a difference in people's lives. Another thing that I got known for nationally was my advocacy for school choice. I really believe in free markets. I really believe in entrepreneurs. And in this case, I really believe that educational entrepreneurs unleashed on our educational system, K through 12, would bring about unbelievable innovative change when it comes to education. So I wanted to bring competition to public education. So for 6 straight years in New Mexico, I proposed that every single student in the state get a school voucher, which would have brought about that competition. Now the legislature vetoed that stuff. They weren't going to have anything to do with that, but I took on the discussion, I took on the debate, and to this day I remain committed to this notion of educational entrepreneurs really delivering better products, better services at lower prices when it comes to education. I would argue that higher education in this country is simply a form of school choice, and that we have the best higher education system in the world, and I would argue, why can't we apply those same principles to kindergarten through 12th grade, and if we did, we would see just dramatic, innovative improvement. As governor, when I started my second term, in keeping with a promise that I made to myself and to citizens, put the issues on the front burner that should be on the front burner. Let's have a hard look at what we're spending and what we're getting. In 1999, I really wanted to take a hard look at the war on drugs in this country, and I wanted to include legalization as a potential alternative to what we were doing. And I came at this from the standpoint that half of what we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons is drug-related. About $70 billion a year. And what are we getting for that money that we're spending? Well, we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. I point out that's the population of New Mexico that gets arrested every single year in this country. And we now have 2.3 million people behind bars in this country. The highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. And the majority of those people are non-violent drug offenders who have sold drugs. That's the majority of those people behind bars. So in 1999, looking at this issue, I really didn't know where it was going to go. I needed to start with Holland because the government said in 1999 that Holland had skyrocketing drug use and that they had skyrocketing crime, and it had to do with the fact that they had effectively decriminalized all drug use. Well, on a very short examination, it turns out that Holland has 60% the drug use as that of the United States. Now that's on a per capita basis, but that's marijuana, that's hard drugs, that's kids, that's adults. So that kind of went out the window. And the other thing that I needed to look at was the notion that marijuana was a gateway drug. Well, I've smoked marijuana, and from my own experience, marijuana is not a gateway drug. But I guess I needed to find out what the government had to say about it, what studies were out there. And I would ask you all, if you haven't done this, just go Google marijuana gateway drug. Just do that and see if in a very short amount of time you don't find out what I'm about to tell you, which is marijuana is not a gateway drug. There's nothing to suggest that it's a gateway drug at all, and the government itself has conducted a study to say that it's not a gateway drug. Now the gateway aspect of marijuana is that the person that sells marijuana also sells harder drugs. So if you take that gateway aspect out of it, they're there to buy marijuana. Well, that person that sells marijuana may be selling cocaine, heroin, LSD, methamphetamine. Take that away, and that contact wouldn't be made. So after looking at this issue for a fairly short amount of time, I came to the conclusion that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related, and that's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. So in 1999, I advocated, and advocate to this day, legalizing marijuana. And when I say legalize marijuana, it is never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car, or do harm to others. It's never going to be legal for kids to smoke or buy pot. It's just not going to happen. And then when it comes to all the other drugs, I advocate harm reduction strategies. Strategies that reduce death, disease, crime, corruption, the things that we really care about. In a nutshell, it's looking at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. I'd like to put a face to the 1.8 million arrests every year. I was in Des Moines, Iowa about 3 months ago, and I met a young man in his mid-30s, and he had been arrested for possession of 1 gram of marijuana. And by the way, of those 1.8 million arrests, 90% of those arrests are for possession only. Well, he was arrested for possession of 1 gram of marijuana. That's the weight of a sheet of paper, just for those that don't know. He was arrested for possession of 1 gram of marijuana with intent to distribute it to his 17-year-old daughter. He was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in jail. He had just gotten out of jail, having served 1 year in jail on that 25-year sentence, and now he was looking at parole and probation for many years in the future. I'd said earlier that I'd smoked marijuana. I've also drank alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke marijuana. But I will tell you there's a big difference between marijuana and alcohol. And the big difference is that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. Citizens of Denver 5 years ago voted to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. It is safer than alcohol. And that's not to condone the use of any substance if you're going to consume that substance and do harm to others. So I got out of office January 1 of 2003. I was term limited. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I think as a result of term limits, I think politicians do good things for you and I, as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. I didn't want to have a say in what was happening in national politics. I didn't want to have a say in what was happening in state politics, because really I had my shot, and I really thought that I made the most out of that shot. But I find myself outraged 18 months ago over the fact that this country is bankrupt. That 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending is borrowed, and that if we don't fix this right now, we're going to be left with nothing. I was on Neil Cavuto here right after the election, and we're on the set, we're on live TV, and it's being said that Republicans wanted to repeal President Obama's health care plan. Well, I couldn't agree with that more. But what I said on television right then to Neil Cavuto was, how about in the spirit of bipartisanship, how about if the Republicans offer up a repeal of the prescription health care benefit that they passed when they controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency? The point is that this is shared responsibility for where we've gotten to right now. I think that Americans in their wisdom gave us both houses of Congress, the Republicans, both houses of Congress and the presidency to say, fix this stuff. That was my dream. That was my lifelong dream. Republicans get into power, all 3 branches, the legislature and Congress and the White House, and we can fix these entitlements. But here we are, 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending is borrowed, we're bankrupt, so that means serious reductions in Medicaid, in Medicare. It means reforming Social Security in a big way so that it is viable going into the future. It means a really hard look at defense. And defense, let's just look at defense for a second. Can we afford for a strong national defense for our own country? Can we afford to spend more money on our own national defense?